Hello and welcome to another step-by-step video presented to you by Tole. This month we're going to be working on something for spring. The theme for the month is Sweet Spring. So I'm going to do something on a 12-inch circle that I got at Dollar Tree. And these are a handy little surface to have in your stash because you can paint any number of things on this. So the next time you go to Dollar Tree and you see these little 12-inch round hanging wood pieces, go ahead and grab a couple. One of the first things we're going to do is we are going to give this surface a coat of bleach sand. I'm going to be decoupaging some tissue paper on it, but I want it to have a more solid background. Here's the deal, I left my bottle of paint open. So when I'm going to paint a larger surface like this, I don't want to waste the space on my palette. So I'm just going to put the paint onto the surface, and I'm going to get out one of my little sponges, I can say that, I really can. And this is so much faster than doing it with a brush. So let's get this surface painted with a coat of bleach sand, and then we'll dry it. We'll give it a quick sand so it's a little smooth, and then I'm going to decoupage some tissue paper on it. Now I'm sure you all know how to decoupage, so I'm not gonna waste valuable video time showing you how I did that, but this I thought was worth a little video time, just a little bit of a time saver when you're base coating large pieces. So I'll be back once I have my tissue paper decoupaged on, and we'll talk about what we're going to paint on this. Alright, so I have my tissue paper decoupaged onto my background, and it shows up a lot better with that bleach sand base coat behind it. And I just used a newsprint tissue paper. This one happens to be printed in orange, and I do carry this on my website, of course. It's 50 cents a sheet if you want to use the exact same tissue paper that I used. But please feel free to use any tissue paper you have in your stash, or no tissue paper. It doesn't really matter, but if you know me, you know I like to do something to the backgrounds. So this was my background treatment for this piece. So the next step we're going to do is we are going to put our pattern on and get started painting. All right, so I have the pattern on. It take a little bit of doing because there are a lot of little parts, but we're going to start painting this by painting the things that are in the background first, and that's going to be these 3 daisies. So you can use a filbert brush or a round brush, however you like. We're going to stroke on those daisy petals with warm white, and I'm going to start with the larger one that's in the back first. You don't have to worry too much about the tails because we're going to put a center on those daisies. So let me get a little bit closer to those daisies and we'll get started. So even with the filbert, some of these petals you're going to have to kind of do 2 strokes. I'm using a number 6 filbert. On 8 you might be able to get away with 1 stroke, but number 6 was what I had handy. So I'm just going to paint in those daisy petals with warm white. And if you're better at doing comma strokes with a round brush, please feel free to do that. But whenever I think of sweet, when everybody says sweet spring, I think of sweets like cake and cookies and all that kind of stuff. Now this daisy's gonna be on top of this back daisy, but I'm gonna go ahead and stroke the full petal in just so I can keep some kind of even, keep it an even stroke. Here, the same thing over here. And let's see, let's do this petal. And then there's a petal right in here. I'm just going to kind of fudge it in there. And then those other daisies will go on top. All right, so we've got one done. Let's work on the other two. They're a little bit, this one is a little bit smaller. This one's just a tidge smaller, I believe. And we're not going to go all the way around with the petals on that one. And when we do some shading on these, that's when we'll really pick which petals are in front and which petals are in back. And you notice my tissue paper, there are some wrinkles, and that's okay. That adds character. This one I'm not going to do a whole petal. I'm not going all the way out here. Just enough to fill in that little space. And then we're going to go here. Add this petal on top. And another one here. They don't have to be perfect. Please keep that in mind. I'm going to do one here. And then one last one right in here. I don't have to worry too much about anything that's over here because it's going to be covered up by a lemon slice. And then let's get our last little daisy painted on. This one's a little bit smaller, so that makes it easy because you only have to do like one little stroke to get those petals on. And these guys won't take too long, I don't think. Depends on how complicated I make them, right? Which I have been known to do that. And here we just have like it's not really a full petal. I'm just getting it in this little area here. Let's see, I think I'm going to make this one a little wider, and then I can put this one in here. So don't be fooled by the shape of this one. I was just filling in the area behind the leaf and the lemon there. So there, we need to let this dry, and then we'll come back and we'll do a little bit of shading and add the centers in and get going on this. All right, so we are going to float some shading on our daisy petals. The first place we're going to go, we're going to do it with gingham blue. Blend it out. You don't want it to be too stark. I'm going to start by just tucking some of this blue in to the center or the lower point of each petal. So just go around the center and tuck a little gingham blue in the on the petals. I think there's probably a little one there. If you have more petals than the pattern, it's okay. It's your daisy. Okay. I always run into trouble when I get too close. I walk myself off the screen. So I'm going to go to this one and do the little tuck of blue around the center. Doesn't really take too long. And let's go to this one on the left and tuck some blue in the center there. All right. So now what we need to do is we need to float some of this blue on the daisy that's in the back. So wherever a petal comes in front of that back daisy, you want to float a little bit of this blue there. So we can put the smaller daisies in front of the larger one. And just a couple more places. All right, so now I want to come back, and I know that I painted the petals with warm white, but I'm going to also come back and just kind of float the tip of each petal to round it out, fix it if it's a little wonky. Really didn't need to fix that one, but just to pop that tip of that petal up just a little bit. See, this is where I get in trouble. I do these little things that, yeah, probably didn't need to do, but I just like to make sure that things pop out a little bit when you're looking at them. You definitely know that this daisy is in front of this daisy. Now these are, I think we're kind of close to being done with these guys. I think I could have made that petal a little longer. So that's what I'm going to do now. See? All right. So what we want to do now is we want to give our daisies some centers. And I'm going to do that with golden straw. And I'm just going to take my round brush. This is, I think, a number 4. It's practically the only round brush I use is a number 4. And on the pattern, they're little small centers, but you can make them a little bit larger. Just make sure they're kind of round. So we're going to tap in some yellow centers on our daisies. And this daisy here, its center is kind of behind the lemon, so have to do a full circle. Okay. So nice round centers tapped in with golden straw. I'm also going to tap in a little bit of spiced pumpkin. And what this is going to do is it's going to pull the background. If you use this orange newsprint, it'll pull the background into the painting on the piece a little more. And that's kind of the top half, the top 2/3. Make sure it's fuzzy. I'm just going to wipe that brush out. Pick up a little bit of warm white and tap just a touch of warm white in that center. Now we're going to add some dark into the lower part of the centers, and I'm going to do that with burnt umber. And make sure you kind of walk it up the sides a little bit, and we kind of lose the golden straw, but we can still see it back there. We can always come back and add golden straw. In fact, that's exactly what I'm going to do. See, I like the way this one turned out, so I'm going to come back and tap just a little golden straw to blend that hard line down. What I really want to do is I want to tint these daisies just a little bit with some of that spiced pumpkin. I want to pull some more of that orange in there. So just going to come in and float some spiced pumpkin here and there. It might not be on every petal. And it might end up being. We'll see what it looks like when we get done. So definitely these lower petals. Yeah. And let's put a little in there. And we'll get a little bit in here. All right. So we tinted them just a little bit. Then I want to come back with a small liner brush. I'm going to use, this is a 10-aught. And I'm just going to line some detail lines, or some, what I'm going to call little wrinkles or gathers into each petal with thinned spiced pumpkin. It helps if you have paint on your brush. And these flowers are going to look way different when we get the stuff on top of them. So don't stress just yet. like I really didn't even need to put things on that. Okay. I was trying to hog the painting to myself. All right. One last little thing I want to do is I want to take a stylus, and I'm going to use the smaller end of it. I just want to add some little dots of burnt umber in the lower part. Not too big and not too many, okay? So just your stylus, add a few little dots of burnt umber. All right, so we're going to move on to our next thing, and that's going to be the lemon slices. All right, I'm going to go ahead and paint my lemon slices in with Sunny Day. It's pretty bright, but we have lots of stuff that goes on top of it, so it will be okay. So you've got one full circle, well, basically full circle, and a couple of them that have a piece out of them. So just a quick coat of Sunny Day, and I will be back. All right, so I painted in my lemon slices with a couple of coats of Sunny Day, really nice and bright. And I actually did put the pattern on, but I put it on with white graphite so I can see it, but you may not be able to. What I'm going to do first, since I have white, warm white out on my palette, is I'm going to paint that the white stuff that is in between the slices. So there's a circle of it in the middle. Doesn't have to be a perfect circle. And then there's a little sliver of it that is in between each of the slices. And it's thinner at the bottom and a little bit wider at the top. Okay. So we're going to do that on all of the lemon slices, and we'll be back. Okay, so I painted the little spokes here, and what I went ahead and did this little border that's between the lemon peel and the segments of the lemon. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to float a little bit of shading on the peeling, and we're going to do that with some spiced pumpkin plus just a touch of burnt umber. So I'm going to go right next to that white stripe that I just did, and I'm just going to add this shading around the peeling. Now I like to mop floats, so I'm going to kind of mop that and soften it. I didn't want to go with straight spiced pumpkin, and I didn't want to go with straight burnt umber, so we just mix them together. And let's get this one. And it's just a nice, soft little float. Try not to get onto your tissue paper, but if you do, it'll be okay. And let's do this last rind. We're continuing continuing to pull some of that orange into this design. And we're going to pull some more in just a few minutes. All right. So now we've got our little peeling kind of separated out there. So I'm going to take my liner brush. I'm going to use my number 4, and I'm just going to pick up some warm white and some sunny day. I just want to lighten up that sunny day a little bit, probably 2 parts warm white, 1 part sunny day. And all we're going to do is we're going to very kind of tap a highlight on the peeling. Could probably use a little bit more sunny day in there, because you know they're not, the peeling on a lemon is kind of rough and I want to say, what do I want to, it's like a peel, like you orange peel on your walls and stuff. So you just want to tap a little bit of a highlight around that edge. So you get the kind of the sense that that's a rough peel. As usual, I'm not going for technically correct here. I'm just going for, you're going to get the idea that this is a lemon slice. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back with spiced pumpkin. I'm going to blend it out really well. I want it to be a soft float. And in the top wider part of each of those segments, I'm going to float this well blended out. See how light that float is? That's what I want. I don't want it to be blaring. But I'm going to do it in the top wider part of each segment. Okay? So each one of these little segments gets a touch of this spiced pumpkin. It's looking a little bit more like a lemon, I think. I'm gonna make a bunch of noise turning this around. So I'm going to finish doing this shading in my lemon segments, and I'll be back. All right, so what I want to do is I want to take my liner brush. I'm going to go ahead and use my number 4, and I'm going to line just some warm white from the center out into each of those little segments. And it can get up into that shading. That's perfectly fine. In fact, that's probably what you want to do. Just to add some texture to each of those little segments. So I'll probably do a fast forward through this. So we need to put these flowers behind these lemon slices. So I'm going to float some very well blended out burnt umber on the flowers that are behind the lemon slices, okay? You don't want it to be real dark. So blend it out. And I'm even going to tuck some of this burnt umber on the back flower just to set it behind a little bit more behind those other two flowers. This is where I get in trouble. I add things. I just keep adding things. So even though I think I'm going to be doing a nice, simple painting, I end up adding so much things. All right, so we need to do something to this white stuff. And we're going to go ahead and continue with that burnt umber, very well blended out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just touch a hint of it on each of those white spokes around the center. And that just kind of helps to define those a little bit better. And we're going to do a little something something to the center too. And it's probably going to involve burnt umber. We're almost done with our slices. Definitely, if you have a turntable, that would make this really easy. All right, so I'm just going to touch, kind of tap with my flat brush a little bit of burnt umber into the bottom of that center. Now I just feel like the outside of this lemon needs just a little bit more highlight. So I'm going to corner load into warm white. And I'm just going to tap a highlight on here of warm white. And yes, it's a little bit fuzzy. But that's okay. All right, I think I'm pretty close to calling this done for now. One more slice. Okay, so there are my fuzzy lemons. So let's go ahead and work on our frosting. And now we want our frosting to be lighter than our lemons. So I'm going to mix up some Sunny Day and warm white, probably 50-50. I want it to be a really light Sunny Day. So I need a little bit more warm white. So we're going to put our frosting on. And you can go right over where there's going to be a leaf because the green will cover it. And that's going to take 2 coats, I'm sure. So I'll be back. All right, so I have 2 coats of that Sunny Day warm white mix on the frosting. But before we get too terrible much farther, what I want to do is I want to go around and float some shading on the background around our design. We kind of did that here when we floated on our flowers, but we need to just pop some shading on the background. Again, blend it out really well. It's going to be burnt umber. And you're going to go around the flowers and the lemons. You're just going to go around everything. Okay, even this leaf we haven't painted yet. And that just helps to pop that design off the background a little bit. And sometimes it's easier to do this before you get all the elements painted in. Now you've got some V areas, like right here, that you need to walk that color out a little bit. And every time you reload, be sure you blend it out really well. So just all the way around this outside edge. And I think you can see it already. It starts popping stuff off the background a little bit. So almost there. Right. So background shading for now done. So our frosting. It's relatively simple frosting. We're going to dry brush some highlighting on it with warm white. I love lemon cake. I don't know about you, but it's one of my faves. Of course, it's kind of hard to beat a vanilla cake with chocolate frosting. So if you need to put your pattern back on, you can do that. I would do it with white graphite. But you want to get up into these layers of the frosting. I hate it when I can't find the words. And highlight those dips and folds. Okay, just think like yummy lemon frosting, or yummy whatever your favorite frosting is. And it's hard to see, I know, but when we add our shading, it will pop up a little bit more. Make sure you're not just doing straight stripes across. You want to think like frosting. It kind of swirls and dips and that kind of stuff. So And you can, if you don't have your pattern on, just have your pattern out there so you can kind of see where it dips and dives. All right, I think you can kind of see that, hopefully. Anyway, we're going to come back and we're going to float some shading on our frosting, and we're going to do that with golden straw. First place we're going to go is down the outside edges. It's a nice soft float. Most of these are. All right, and again, if you like to mop, this would be a good place to do it. And I'm going to go on this outside edge before I do that inside edge. It's starting to look yummy. Let's turn this over. Do this side. We'll do the easy sides first. All right. So now we can float down this side, the right side of that front cupcake, and then on the back cupcakes next to the front cupcake, still with golden straw. I'm going to turn this over so I can do it a little bit easier. All right. And now we can go on the cupcakes behind the front one. So you kind of end up with back-to-back floats right there. Okay, so I want to come in here and just darken this where it's behind that front cupcake a little bit more. All it was is a matter of adding a second float of the golden straw. I can say complete sentences, really I can, but I'm getting ahead of myself and trying to think what's going to happen next. Well, my friends, what's going to happen next is we are going to float some shading under those folds a little bit, again with golden straw. So on this front cupcake, there's a little bit of a ledge here, a little bit of a wedge of frosting we need to do. And then we're going to come across here. Yummy. These kind of cupcakes don't even need sprinkles to make them taste good. So I do want to touch a little bit of shading across the bottom of each section. Still working with that golden straw. All right. So let's move to our other 2 cupcakes and do the same thing. This time I'm going to be smart though. I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. And if you don't get the frosting just exactly like it is on the pattern, it's really okay. Frosting doesn't ever go on the same for me. Okay, that one was easy. I'm gonna go across, I'll go to this other side here. Sorry, didn't mean to confuse you. And again, I'm going to start at the top this time. There is a little sliver of shading that goes in that top little section. And then we're going to finish this one off. And then we need to come back and do that golden straw along the bottom of each section. All right, so this means I'm going to come in with some warm white and I'm going to float a highlight basically just on the top section where it's in front of the lemon, just to bring that forward. And we'll come back and we'll float on the lemon slices to tuck them down inside that frosting. So we're going to go ahead and pick up a little bit of burnt umber. Again, very well blended out. And a little bit of spiced pumpkin. And we're going to drop that, we're going to shade that on those lemon slices where they're tucked into the frosting. Okay? I'm going to say okay until I hear you say okay. So that means I'm going to be saying it for the rest of my Zoom career, my YouTube video career. This one is going to have a leaf over it, so don't worry about it too terrible much. Okay. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to dry brush just a little bit more, highlighting with warm white just to spark it back up. It's not right up in the top, mainly through the center of each section. But you don't want to wipe out that shading, you did. But you do want to spark up that highlight a little bit. Yummy, yummy. I think I'm going to go bake a lemon cake now. All right, so I'm going to call the frosting basically done. We're going to work on, let's work on our leaves now. We're going to go ahead and paint those in with, I believe we're going to go ahead and do Hauser medium green. All right, so we're going to paint our leaves in with Hauser medium green. I think one coat should do it. was going to do it with a flat brush, but I think I'll find my round back and do it with that. Okay. I think that is a good color to go with lemons. What do you think? So 7 leaves, all painted with Hauser medium green. I'll probably fast forward through this. All right, so I'm going to dry brush some highlighting on these leaves with golden straw first. You know, that's the key word there, first. That means there's probably more coming. And I'm going to do that. These leaves have the center vein line, so I'm going to dry brush on either side of that center vein line to form those 2 sections of the leaf, okay? So I leave that where the center vein line is going to be kind of open. Luckily, there's only 7 leaves, so it doesn't take all that long. All right, I should back up a little bit because there was that one little leaf down here in the bottom. And now we're going to float some shading. Actually, we're going to float highlighting first on those leaves. And that's going to be done with golden straw also. So we dry brush highlighting first, and now we're going to float highlighting. So what's going to happen is I'm going to go across the top edge here with a float of golden straw. And I'm just going to drop down to that center vein line and float that with golden straw. I don't flip my brush over or anything like that. I just float the top edge and then drop down and float the center vein line. And you'll be able to see the center vein line better as we float shading on it. So top edge and the center vein line. Get this highlight of golden straw. All right, cool. We got one side done. And almost done with the others. so those floats need to dry a little bit. All right, we're gonna float shading on our leaves, and that's gonna be with Hauser Dark Green. So I'm gonna go across the bottom edge of the leaf. I'll get a little closer here. And then I'm gonna pop up and float the center vein line. So it ends up to be like a back-to-back float against that center vein line. One side is Golden Straw, one side is Hauser Dark. So the lower edge, we do have a couple more places to float the shading, and then center vein line. Let's do this last one. Let's start up at the top because I have to tuck it in around that flower. I got a little too much there. So I'll get it off my background. Righty. So let's dry that, and then we'll continue with our shading. So what we need to do is we need to float shading in the bottom of each leaf. We need to float where it's behind something. So I'm going to float this bottom of this leaf here, this section, and I kind of do a C-stroke float in it, and then I'm going to tuck it behind the cupcake. This one needs to get tucked behind the cupcake. And here's another one. Needs to get tucked behind the cupcake. And the lemon. This is getting tucked behind that lemon. You don't want to be stingy with this float in the bottom here. You want to make it kind of wide. That helps to tuck it behind whatever is in front of it if you make it just a little bit wider. So this needs to dry. So I'm going to hit it with my little heat gun. So I want to dry brush a little bit more highlighting on my leaves. And this time I'm going to do it with Sunny Day. I want a little bit brighter yellow highlight on them. So Sunny Day, it's a dry brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush kind of how the veins go on your leaf, little sections that flare out from the center vein line, just to give the leaves a little bit more dimension. Little V's. And I think you can see how it helps to add a little dimension to those leaves. Doesn't take a lot. One more down here at the bottom. All right. So now I'm going to just line that center vein line with a liner brush and some thinned Hauser dark green. You just want to reinforce it. You don't want to make it blare at you. Doesn't go all the way to the point of the leaf. I got a little green on my lemon there, but I'll fix it a little later. So just a nice little thin center vein line. Alrighty. So we can go to our, we need to float some shading around these leaves, because some of them are on top of things. So again, a little bit of burnt umber, very well blended out. It's like you barely corner load into it and you blend that out. So I'm gonna float here around this leaf. It's on top of the lemon and on top of the frosting. This one's on top of flowers. So you want to touch a little bit of burnt umber shading on the leaf itself behind the flower. And I'm going to go ahead and float in the bottom of that leaf also, just to deepen that shading a little bit. I'm going to come over here, add a little burnt umber shading at the base of the leaf. Let's do this guy. Burnt umber shading at the base of the leaf. And then I'm also going to go on the flower around the leaf. Okay, let's go to this one. At the base of the leaf, it needs a little bit of that burnt umber. Next to the lemon. And I'm going to go on this one at the bottom where it's next to the cupcake wrapper. I'm going to go on this guy next to the frosting and the lemon slice. Then we also want to come around this one with that very blended out burnt umber. I'm also going to float next to this lemon slice on the frosting, just to pop that edge out a little bit too. So let's work on our cupcake, the actual cake. I'm gonna go ahead and baste that in with honey brown. Go ahead and use my round brush. It's a nice golden brown cake. Right, looks like yummy cake. Just 2 more to go. Another fast forward moment. All right, we need to add some texture to this cake. So I'm going to pick up some honey brown and some golden straw, and I'm going to stipple through the center of each of those little cupcakes. So it's just going to start adding some texture to our cake. So another fast forward moment here. All right, the next thing we need to do is we need to stipple a little bit of highlighting on that cake texture. And so on the dirty brush, it still has that honey brown golden straw mix. You want to pick up a little warm white, and you're going to stipple a little bit of highlighting on the outside edges of the cake, and maybe just a little touch through the center. It does not go all the way across the cake, okay? Just keep it in the outside edges and a little in the center. So now we need to set that cake inside the cupcake wrapper. And so we're going to float a little bit of very well blended out burnt umber along the lower edge of the cake. That's going to be right above the zigzags of the cupcake paper. Keep this float nice and soft and walk it up in those little V areas where the zigzags dip down, because you want it to be nice and soft and kind of blend. You want it to be a little bit darker. If you look at cupcakes that you bake, they are always just a little darker as they dip into the cupcake wrapper. You want to be sure to float this burnt umber on the back right cupcake next to the frosting on the center cupcake. I think I already did that on the other side, so I just wanted to make sure you did it yourself. So the next thing we want to do is we want to line a shadow under that frosting where it sits on top of the cupcake. And so what you're going to do is take a liner brush and thin down some burnt umber, not quite as thin as liner consistency paint, maybe 50% water, 50% paint, and you're just going to line a shadow on the cupcake underneath the frosting, and that's going to make it look like the frosting is sitting right on top of the cupcake. And talking about cupcakes, I'm just like getting way hungry for a cupcake. I don't know about you, but I may have to stop recording and go bake myself some cupcakes. Next up is we need to paint the cupcake wrappers, and we're going to do that with bleach sand. You can also put the pattern on for where the wrapper wraps around behind the cupcake. So we need to start setting in those little folds and the creases on the cupcake paper. So I'm going to dry brush those folds from the pointy part of the zigzag on the top of the cupcake paper down. So just some vertical lines from the point down. Try not to end them all in the same place, but it's just a quick and easy way to start setting in those folds and creases in our cupcake paper. So let's have another fast forward moment, and I'll be back. What we need to do next is to float an actual highlight across the top of the cupcake paper with straight warm white. And this is just going to brighten it up and pop it really forward in front of the cake in that paper. Alright, so apparently I forgot to press record when I got to this part of the project. So I just grabbed a piece of scrap wood and added the cupcake wrapper to it, and did as much as what we had done in the last part of the video. So what we need to do now is we need to dry brush the darker areas that form the creases. And so I'm going to do that with honey brown, and I'm going to pick up just a touch of burnt umber. You don't want very much burnt umber at all in the mix. All right, and so we dry brushed highlighting at the points. So now we're going to dry brush in between those lines of warm white that we dry brushed on. So very lightly, it doesn't have to be a hard scrub. We just want to go through and add this dry brush of color to help form those creases in our cupcake paper. I have a hard time saying cupcake paper. If I say it too fast, it comes out cut cake paper. I'll have to work on that if I plan on painting any more cupcakes. So we're just setting in the shading areas, shaded areas of the creases with that mix of honey brown and a little bit of burnt umber. All right, you can see it already looks a little bit more like a cupcake paper. I was very careful that time. So we're going to do some shading on our cupcake paper with this honey brown burnt umber mix. What we want to do here is we want to shade next to the cupcake, the cake part, on the cupcake paper, where it's tucked behind the cupcake, okay? You have a little area that curves around behind the cupcake. So you just want to float shading on that. And that just sets that around behind. So then we're also going to float shading down the side and across the bottom of the cupcakes. And this is going to be for all three of them. And this part too. If there's a spot where the cupcake paper wraps around behind the cake, you want to float this shading in there. So I'm going to start about halfway, 2/3 of the way up on the side of my cupcake papers. And I'm just going to float this honey brown burnt umber mix down the side and across the bottom. Okay, and that helps give it some shape also. So then when you get to the other side, you just kind of float up that side too. You want to walk that color out in these corners. And again, I apologize that I forgot to hit record. Apparently it's one of those weeks for me because I didn't press record for the writing either. So I just went to the back of my piece and added some of the lettering, and I'll just get a little closer to it. So the lettering is going to be painted with your liner brush. I'm going to use the number 2, and I'm going to use that same mix of honey brown plus some burnt umber. I don't want it to be burnt umber dark, so that's why we're using that mix with honey brown in it. So what you're going to do is you're going to very slowly paint your lettering. And now it doesn't have to be painted the way you write. You know how you continue your writing. You don't break it up. You can break this up. And so I'm going to start by painting the S here. And what you want to do is do this in little sections. Break it up. You start on, keep your pattern close by so you can see where there are fat parts of the lettering. So there should have been a fat part here. So in order to add those fat parts, all you want to do is from your tip of your brush, you're just going to flatten it out a little bit. And this isn't going to move that well because it's raw wood. I didn't take the time to paint it, mainly because I was just so disgusted with myself. So you start on your tip, and when you want it fatter, you flatten it out. And this little S has like a little comma stroke here, so I'm going to turn this over. Look at that bleed in the grain of the wood. But I think this is going to give you the idea of how you do your lettering. So just break it into pieces. It doesn't have to all be done like you're handwriting it. All right? I kind of always start at the top of a letter and work my way down. So I'll come back here and add the rest of that E. I'm going to start at the top and come down. I got thick there, you see. Top and come down. So just take your time. It helps if you kind of hold your brush a little bit straighter up and down than you normally do. I know we get lazy and we don't hold it as straight up and down as we should when we're lining sometimes. So just kind of watch that and take your time as you do your lettering. All right, so hopefully I have the rest of this video actually recorded. So another apology. So we need to add a little border to our piece. We're going to use a, I don't know what this is called, but we're going to use it. And I'm going to get my gray chalk pencil. There it is. And let's see. That way you can add the pattern for your border. And keep it relatively even. I'm having a darn time remembering what this is called. It has a name, and I'll figure it out probably after I'm done with this video. So the border got a little thinner. There. So it depends on what kind of a border you want. I think I'm going to do checks, and I think I'm going to do them with umber. And what I like to do is I have a stripe stencil, so I'm going to use it to put my checks on. It's kind of makes it easier for me. So I just kind of line up the first two stripes. And they don't need to be opaque. Okay. And then I'm going to line up the next one. You could freehand this if you wanted to, or put a pattern on, but this way works for me. So I'm just going to continue to add these checks around the border, and I'll be back. All right, so there's our Sweet Spring welcome sign for your door, or wherever you'd like to put it, in your office, in your bathroom, because you always want to welcome people into your bathroom. Anyway, I appreciate you joining me, and I look forward to the next time I get to bring you a project at Tole Town.